All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry for a bit of technical difficulties. That always happens, unfortunately, but we're now here with you, and I think we can start. So it's really great to see all of you joining. And today we want to talk to you a little bit about website accessibility. So my name is Elisa. I lead our WordPress unit here at Beetroot, and I'm joined by Max, who's one of our developers specializing in accessibility.
Hi everyone, excited to be here and share some of my knowledge about creating accessible websites.
Alrighty, so we're done with the intros, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we're gonna talk about in the next 30 minutes. So today we want to walk you through what website accessibility actually means today. So why it matters, who it impacts, and what you can do about it. We plan to cover the legal, technical, and business implications. So whether you're a website owner, a digital agency, or content creator, we really hope that you'll be able to find something interesting or useful here for you. Oh, perfectly, like in the perfect world, both. And I will let you know right away that at the end of the webinar, we're going to leave some time for questions. So feel free to prepare them, feel free to add them in the chat as we go, and we're going to get to them at the end. Alrighty, so I think that's all with the organizational things. And before I start attacking Max with technical questions, I want to start with a little bit of context and discuss what we actually mean when we say that a website is accessible. And I don't want to be the only one participating today with Max, so I would like to engage you a little bit. And I would ask you to share in the chat with us what do you think an acceptable website means? So while you're doing that, Max, I'm gonna actually turn to you for a bit. And I was wondering, when did you actually first dive into accessibility?
First time, it was actually similar webinar. I was invited there as kind of interpreter, I'd say, like a person with technical background, let's call it that way, because those two guys who were speaker there, they like had decades of experience in accessibility behind them, but they knew all this professional slang regarding accessibility and all that, and I had to like translate it into more human friendly text for them in case someone missed the point at some point in time. So I guess this was the first time I dove this deep into accessibility.
Okay, cool. That kind of sounds a bit like a nice superhero backstory. And I think it's quite amazing that, initially you joined someone else, but now you're the one who's going to be taking the lead on this. Alrighty, so talking about website accessibility and an accessible website, the way I see it, it refers to removing barriers that might prevent people with all kinds of disabilities or limitations from accessing a website or interacting with it. So basically, when the websites are properly designed, everyone should have equal access to the information. And I'm actually looking at the chat here right now, and I see that people are already really diving into the technical things. So I think our audience is quite prepared today. So yeah, that's quite a good point in the chat. And that's actually something that we're going to cover a little bit later when we switch to the technical part. Alrighty, so yeah, what I was saying is the main point for website accessibility is making sure that all users can get equal access to the information that the website contains.
So basically, it's about inclusivity.
Yeah, at its core, accessibility is primarily about inclusivity, making sure that everyone, no matter the abilities, can access the information and can properly and fully participate online. But It's not just the right thing to do ethically, but it also makes quite good business sense. So when your website is accessible, you're opening the doors to a much wider audience, including people with disabilities. And that's actually quite a big audience, which is unfortunately very often overlooked. And obviously, it also has significant buying power. And on top of that, there's also the legal side, and probably not even on top of that, but more as a result of the ethical aspect. So, as of now, there are legislations like ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act in the US, and Web Accessibility Directive in European Union, and this one's actually kind of fresh because it just came into effect at the end of June of this year. And the main idea of these legislations is to make sure that everyone can enjoy non-discriminatory access to technology. So basically, accessibility sits at the intersection of ethics, business, and law. So it's about first doing the right thing, reaching a broader audience, and also meeting the legal requirements which are now in place.
I see. I think we should also give a quick overview of who it impacts because accessibility isn't just for a tiny portion of users, right?
Yeah, that's actually, as I already mentioned, quite a big group. So, in general, to set a bit of a context, it's considered that there are four types of impairments: visual, hearing, mobility, and cognitive. And within themselves, they include a number of different conditions, which can actually be both permanent and temporary. So, these conditions may actually require different considerations when making a website accessible. And talking about the actual share of users, we can refer, for example, to an iconographics shared by CDC about a year ago. And they state that over 28% of adults in the US, and that's actually more than one in four, have some kind of disability. So not everyone in the group requires accessibility considerations because these can be really different. But in any case, this is still a very significant part of the population which needs to have access to technology. On top of that, it doesn't have to be a permanent condition per se, but for example, someone who just had an eye surgery. So on an average day, they don't need an accessible website, but for, let's say, a week while they're recovering from the surgery, they do need it. So if you take that into consideration, it actually impacts a wider range of people.
And it's not to mention the aging population.
Yeah, well, that's a factor as well. It's possible to say that aging is a trend right now. It's not that I'm super happy about it, but unfortunately, that's how it works. And this is the trend that is not going to go anywhere. So we have to always consider that. So with time, accessibility will become more and more needed for more and more people. So the bottom line here is it helps everyone and not just people with permanent disabilities. Well, I hope that sets a bit of a context for what we're going to be discussing further. And I would like to move to more practical things. So, Max, now I'm going to be turning to you for speaking. So, let's say a company wants to make their website accessible but doesn't have any experience yet. Where do you think they should start?
Well, to begin with, I think it's important to figure out what the requirements are, and there are actually three levels of accessibility according to Web Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, as it's often called. It's level A, double A, and triple A.
Okay, so these are the requirements that we need to adhere to, and I would like you to go through them and explain the differences a bit. Let's start with level A.
Oh, this level is basically the absolute minimum. Basically, this is the must-have. And it includes 32 success criteria. And if you don't meet this level, then assistive technology like screen readers might not even be able to make sense of your site. It's the baseline to make things at least somewhat usable for people with disabilities.
All right, so level A is basically the bare minimum, the absolute bare minimum. And I'm assuming they kind of have to go up. So level A should have some wider requirements.
Yeah, double A level is the one most websites should aim for. Actually, it builds on top of level A, and it adds even more guidelines, 24 additional criteria to be more precise, and it's all to make the site work better for more people. If your site meets this level, it's generally considered accessible for the majority of users, and it's the level many legal standards refers to.
Yeah, I actually believe this is the recommendation for the Web Accessibility Directive in EU, and it basically covers most of the requirements. Well, these can, of course, differ between legislations because there are the legislations not just in the European Union and not just in the US. There are lots of them. So I'd say it's always a good idea to get a consult for your business and website specifically to know for sure that this is what you should meet. But in general, this is kind of the rule of thumb. Alrighty, and the last one is the AAA level, and I would assume since this is the kind of should have, the AAA should be nice to have.
Yeah, it's a gold standard actually, but it's nice to have because it's sometimes difficult to achieve. It includes everything from the first two levels and then adds even more advanced criteria, 31 more success criteria. And again, it's a great to aim for, but to be honest, it may become a bit unmanageable. So, because some of the requirements are pretty strict and don't apply to all types of content.
All right, so basically, what we can take away from this is that the sweet spot between being realistic and being responsible would be level AA. If you can, try to strive for perfection for the AAA level.
Yeah, you could say that double A gives a strong level of accessibility and it's manageable. You're not going to go into unmanageable territory, and it's what most organizations again should aim for, and in many cases, it's what's legally expected. So yet again, triple A is ideal, but can be hard to fully achieve.
Okay, that makes sense. And one more thing I wanted to confirm with you before we move on. There is now a new version of the guidelines, WCAG 2.2, as far as I'm aware. And correct me if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, if we're talking about what's required, like really required, it's still WCAG 2.1, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But 2.2 introduces nine new criteria, and while it's not yet obligatory to comply with these requirements, it will likely become a requirement in the future, so the websites can be even more accessible. So I would say it's a similar case with as with AAA level, not yet a must, but definitely won't hurt if you are able to comply with this.
Okay, cool. So, okay, now we understand what we should kind of strive for. And I think we can dive a bit more into the practical and technical sides of accessibility. So, let's talk about your personal experience. When you see different websites on the web, what are the most common accessibility issues that you notice?
Well, since it's personal experience, it's of course a bit subjective answer, but I think the most common three are poor contrast, missing alt text attributes, and inaccessible forms.
Okay, so once again, let's go one by one. The first one you mentioned was poor text contrast. So what's that one about?
That's basically mean that colors on the site don't stand out enough from each other. So, for example, light gray text on a white background might look sleek, but for a lot of people, it's really hard to read. Or like we have it on our slide, different combination of colors, but still, right one is difficult to read, unlike the left one.
Okay, but once again, this is something that can be kind of subjective. So I assume there must be some proper guidelines for like minimal requirements here.
Yeah, sure. WCG has specific contrast rule for both text and non-text elements. And if we are talking about text elements, for standard text, if it's in normal font weight and below 24 pixels, or in bold and below 19 pixels, the minimum contrast ratio should be 4.5 to 1. And if it's a large text, which means over 24 pixels normal and over 19 pixels bold, then you can go a bit lower to 3 to 1. At the highest level of accessibility, which is AAA, those contrast requirements get, of course, stricter. For standard text, it's 7 to 1, and for large text, it's 4.5 to 1.
All right, and the non-text elements that you mentioned?
Yeah, it's non-text elements like icons, buttons, and focus outlines. When you deal with this, you need to have at least a 3 to 1 contrast ratio with whatever around them, so that users can actually see and interact with them easily.
All right, that actually makes quite a lot of sense. Uh, but also, it seems like this is something that doesn't just come into play during the development, but something that has to be considered at the initial design stage. So the designers have to be familiar with the requirements, and when creating the initial design, make sure that they find the balance between the visual style that they want to achieve and what's going to be actually readable.
Yeah, sure. Accessibility isn't just developers' responsibility. It's a common effort from everyone working on the website, including designers and SEO specialists or content creators. But I guess we'll cover a part of it later.
Okay, I'm a big fan of teamwork and shared responsibility. Always good. So where were we? The second one was missing alt text attribute, correct?
Yeah, actually, this one is really important because without alt text attributes, screen readers won't be able to describe image content to users if you, especially if you want to do it.
Mhm. So I assume if screen readers aren't able to describe the image, that basically cuts out the visually impaired users from the experience completely.
Yeah, exactly. Alt text attributes are very helpful and help access the image information to get full experience, fuller experience.
So all of the images on the website basically must contain alt text.
No, not specifically. It depends because it depends on what the image is for. There are actually two main types of images: informative and decorative.
All right, the naming is fairly self-explanatory, but I'm not gonna rely on myself here. So can you walk us through the differences?
So basically, informative images are those that actually add meaning. So if the page would lose important context without that image, then yeah, you need to have alt text, and this attribute should contain text not longer than 100 character, and of course, it should be clear. If the image needs a longer explanation, it's usually better to write it in body text and have shorter alt text attribute value, like I said, under 100 characters. And speaking of decorative images, it's something like backgrounds or visual accents. This don't need this. They don't add any meaning, so screen readers don't need to call them out. In those cases, you should still add the alt attribute, but you just leave empty value for it. Then it tells the screen reader just to skip this image.
Okay, so I'll sum it up in my head and for everyone here. So if it's a meaningful image, you need to add short and clear alt text. If you need anything detailed there, better move it into the body text. And if the image is purely decorative, just leave the alt text attribute empty, just to make sure you don't distract and confuse the users.
Yeah, and don't worry if you miss alt attribute entirely. I mean, you don't have it at all. All these testing tools, and I think even Google is going to tell you about it. So you are not going to miss it entirely. Just remember to leave it empty at least.
Okay, perfect. Well, it's good that I'm learning something. Hopefully, people listening to us are as well. And coming back to the last thing that you mentioned here, it was forms, I believe. So, what makes a form accessible or inaccessible?
Well, actually, forums it's the place where a lot of accessibility issues show up, and they can really block users from doing basic things like signing up, making a purchase, or filling out a contact request. And the common issue here, one of the most common issues here, is missing proper labels. If a form field doesn't have it, isn't labeled, then the label or a label isn't correctly connected to the input. Then screen reader can tell users what the field is for, and that makes the form almost impossible to use for someone who is blind or visually impaired.
All right. Well, I don't know about you or the people here, but I sometimes struggle trying to fill out the forms correctly, even when I see the labels. So I would imagine it may be quite hard to achieve that without them. I actually made a mistake on an official online form recently because the label wasn't straightforward and it was something that you couldn't correct afterwards. So I couldn't complete the application. And it's been 3 weeks now of trying to correct it to no success. I'm not sure why everyone needed the story, but I kind of want to share the pain. It's been stressful. But yeah, getting back to the important things, forms. Is there anything else you would like to mention here?
Yeah, sure. Labels alone aren't enough. Actually, every part of the form needs to be accessible with just a keyboard. So if you hit tab key, you should be able to move through all the fields in order. And when you hit enter key, you should submit the form. And a lot of people actually rely on the keyboard navigation, not just people with disabilities. It also helps anyone using assistive devices or even just those working on a mobile keyboard. And another big one, I think, is focus management. If there is an error, for example, say you missed the required field, the focus should jump right on to that field so users know where the problem is. Basically, it's very helpful for people with limited attention or cognitive impairments.
Yeah, I think the keyboard navigation, which you first mentioned, is huge. And actually, I want to come back to the official form I just mentioned. As you can tell, I still cannot let it go. But that form wouldn't allow to use keyboard even within one field, let alone switch between fields. And even I found it quite inconvenient and stressful. And I would imagine for many people that would be quite a huge problem and could actually prevent them from completing the form. It's not like I managed to complete it, but anyway. And good point with the errors too, but I also wanted to piggyback on that a little bit and add that at times I noticed that the messages aren't super clear and it's at times hard to understand why the field returns an error and what you should do to fix it.
Yeah, it's actually quite important to make error messages clear. Don't just rely on color to show something that something went wrong. Use icons or patterns and explain what's wrong in simple, helpful language. Well, basically, say what the problem is and how to fix it.
Okay. Well, that seems obvious, but I've also seen my fair share of forms that were missing that, so I think it's still worth mentioning. Well, is there anything else you would like to add here before we move on to the next topic?
Let me think. Maybe it's worth mentioning that if we deal with more complex form or dynamic content, or we just want to enhance our markup, then we might need to look at ARIA attributes. They give screen readers extra information that regular HTML can't provide.
All right, so now we're getting a bit too technical for me. So, can you explain a bit more what the ARIA attributes are, and if possible, as if I'm a 5-year-old, please?
Well, ARIA is short for Accessible Rich Internet Application, and it's a set of attributes you can add to HTML elements that define ways to make web content and application accessible to users with disabilities who use assistive technology. But I guess it's still a bit technical, so let's try a more human-friendly explanation. Imagine you stand in front of a door, and there are a few stickers on it. The first one says it's a door, and the second one push or pull. Those basically are your area attributes. That's how visually impaired people figure out where they are and how to proceed based on the screen reader feedback. It's going to read the stickers, aka area attributes, to provide additional information, aka let the user know that it's a door in front of them and it's necessary to push or pull to get it open.
All right, nice. Thank you. I really appreciate the metaphor. That actually made sense. And should these ARIA attributes always be used?
No, not always. Actually, there is a golden rule here. No ARIA is better than bad ARIA. If you don't need it, then just don't use it, because if used not correctly, ARIA can really make it harder for users. But if it used properly, then it can really enhance accessibility. Just make sure you done it right. And by the way, back to the door example of
Perfect.
if you have automatic doors instead of like regular wooden door, for example, you most likely don't need to use any stickers, because the door is going to get opened as soon as anyone steps in the sensor's fields of vision. You could of course keep stickers on, but they will be mostly useless in this case. So the same goes for ARIA attributes. Use what HTML provides to you, basically, because there is enough functionality out of the box. And HTML elements have semantic meaning to be used, and use ARIA attributes only when you just need to enhance or add semantics to an element that otherwise doesn't have it.
All right. Well, thanks again for the door. Otherwise, I would probably completely lost. So, if I understand this correctly, the idea here is to use ARIA attributes to complement, but not complicate your efforts.
Yeah, precisely. And actually, World Wide Web Consortium provides an excellent outline on ARIA purpose and problems it addresses on their Way ARIA overview site, which you can check out if you are interested in to dive deeper into it.
Okay, perfect. Maybe someone actually decides to review that in a bit more detail. And actually, while we're on it, I'm a bit curious to know how many people who are listening to us now are familiar with what area attributes are and maybe used them before. So feel free to send a plus in the chat if you had more information about it than I did. And while you're answering, I'm gonna ask you, Max, can you tell us a fun fact about it, or anything you consider a fun fact?
I'm not sure it's going to be fun because it's all technical, but let's try some additional info regarding usage of ARIA attributes. All websites have menus at the top, right? I mean, one
I
way or
think so,
another.
yeah.
And in HTML, there is a specific element to outline navigation, which is called nav. Ideally, you should use it, but in case you have to deal with a legacy site, which was created before all the standards and tools were introduced and enforced, and it considers it's built exclusively of div elements for again for whatever reason. You can use an area attribute called role with value navigation, and when anyone using a screen readers get there, then the screen reader is going to announce the region as navigation, not just a list or even a simple group of links. So user is going to know that it's navigation they hit.
Okay, cool. Once again, a bit too technical for me to consider it fun, but the whole joy, I think. In the meantime, let me take a look at the answer. So, yeah, it seems like we have someone who's familiar with that, and people who are 50-50, so probably heard of it, never used it. So if you want to find out more, Max mentioned where you can find more information, and you can also follow up with us and we'll share the links for research for you. All right, well, I think it's time to move on to the next topic. And also, this is something that really surprised me when we first started talking about it. So apparently, accessibility and SEO actually have some things in common.
Yeah, actually, they really do. On the surface, they might seem like totally different things, but a lot of what makes a site accessible actually contributes to more SEO friendly website.
Okay, still not super obvious for me. So can you give a few examples?
I guess I'll give you three of them. First one would be understandable content, of course. Both accessibility and SEO, they love clear, easy to follow content. In case of SEO, search engines reward sites that are well structured and easy to navigate, and users, especially those using assistive tech, they need the same thing basically. In fact, two big principles of accessibility are those that websites should be operable and understandable. So if you're writing the content that's clean and structured, you're helping both humans and Google.
Okay, well, I'm actually with Google here. I am not a patient person, as you probably know, so I get frustrated if a site is not easy to navigate and I struggle to find what I need. Alrighty, what else? You promised three.
Yes, second one, it's text optimization. For SEO, we all know this means using the right keywords so your site ranks well. And if we're talking about accessibility, it benefits from this too, actually. When you write clear, focused content and add things like alt text for images, what we already mentioned, then screen readers can understand your site better. So again, same effort, double the value.
Okay, well, this one I could have guessed, but I never actually thought of it. And what was the last one that you wanted to mention?
Mobile friendliness. Again, Google wants your site to look good and work well on mobile, and the accessibility guidelines say the same thing basically, especially for users who zoom in on content or use magnification tools. So if your site works on mobile, you're already halfway to meeting key accessibility standard.
Okay, but I would kind of say that mobile friendliness is already quite a default requirement for all websites, even beyond accessibility. So, still a must have, but for sure good to mention. So, summing up as I like, SEO and accessibility have quite a number of crossings. So, you can say that they aren't entirely separate strategies.
Yeah, exactly. Just make your site more accessible, and chances are your SEO will improve right along with it. So sure there are areas that don't overlap, but you can cover a lot of ground just by focusing on the shared stuff first.
Okay, perfect. I think that's quite convenient. Well, Max, thank you so much for giving us some insights into the technical considerations for accessibility. This is something I would never be able to cover by myself. And now I want to talk a little bit about what might happen if you actually ignore accessibility.
That sounds very important to talk about actually, because it may have far-fetching implications. So, but you are far more knowledgeable than me here. So, stage to you here.
All right, fair enough. My turn. I was kind of hoping to avoid that, but all right. What happens if a company just ignores accessibility? I think everyone can probably guess that nothing good's going to happen. So basically, there are two main avenues for potential consequences: legal consequences and business consequences.
Legal consequences always sounds a bit terrifying.
Well, yeah, this is kind of where things get real. So, as of now, governments around the world are really cracking down on this, and that's actually a good thing. And in many industries, accessibility isn't optional, it's actually the law. So, if your site doesn't meet the standards, if it's required to, you can face serious fines.
And how serious are we talking about?
Well, that really depends on the country, whether it's a first time violation, so on and so forth. There are a lot of things that go into it. And I looked into a lot of resources while doing research for this webinar. And to give you some ballparks, in the US, for example, the penalties can range from anywhere between 100,000 to 200,000 per violation. And if talking about Europe or European Union to be precise, um, It really depends country to country, and it ranges from anywhere like 5,000 euros and up to quarter of a million. And actually, Germany was leading the list with up to half a million euros possible in potential penalties.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive issue. Pretty
Yeah,
expensive.
that's a lot of money. But of course, legal stuff can get a bit tricky. So there are a lot of variables, and the fines can really depend on the situation. But the bottom line is if your website is supposed to be accessible and it's not, it will most likely cost you at some point. And not just directly financially, but in some cases, it can also lead to business suspension or other serious consequences. So the main thing is a lot of these issues are actually avoidable quite easily if you implement the accessibility practices in the first place. And the investment into making sure that your website is accessible is going to be much more reasonable than having to face the fines.
You also mentioned business implications. Are you talking about big fines and possible suspension we just discussed?
Well, that of course obviously has impact on your business, but there's actually more to that. And we kind of covered it before, so I think you might have an idea. But it's not just about the revenue that you already have and the fines and extra costs that you can trigger, but it's also about lost potential revenue. So, as I mentioned earlier, and I think I'm going to cover actually one of the questions that we have in the chat about the percentage of people with disabilities who might need accessibility. So in the US, it's over 28% of the population, and it's quite similar for EU actually. There was a report published by Euro Commission in 2023, which states that almost 27% of the adults, so also 1 in 4, have a disability. And also answering the question that we had in the chat, these are all of the disabilities, and it's hard to separate them into which ones will actually require accessibility for websites and which won't. Uh, but it's safe to assume that probably way more than half of this is the people who require some considerations. So obviously, this is a huge market share, and we'll also have the aging population that we already mentioned. This is something that's going to continue. There are going to be more people aging and more people in need of accessing websites. So we do need a larger number of accessible websites. So if your website isn't accessible, you're basically limiting your audience yourself and, well, simply losing out on revenue. So let's say your competitor's website is accessible and yours isn't. Most likely these clients will just go directly to them. Because imagine, for example, you or someone is going to a website, they're struggling to navigate it, they cannot interact with it, is getting frustrated, and they go for a second option, and the second option is your competitor, and their website actually works, which is kind of the minimum expectations that you typically have for websites. And here is where you kind of lose the opportunity and you lose the client because of something that you could have avoided. And it's obviously going to be more than just one person.
Yeah, putting it like that, it's actually a pretty valid point. And is there anything else you think worth mentioning?
Well, I also think that there is an ethical aspect to this and reputational damage. I do personally believe that companies that willfully decide to ignore making their website accessible will eventually suffer the damage to their brands, their reputations, and in general is going to be quite frowned upon.
Yeah, whether you take this into consideration or not says a lot about your business, I guess. And I believe we have made it pretty clear on why this is important, right? And let's say someone's watching and they're wondering, what do I do now? So where do they start?
Well, I would say that ideally you should find someone who is familiar with accessibility and works with it on a daily basis and engage their help. And we also had some questions in the chat regarding this, so I'm going to cover it right away. I love being super efficient, so that's quite cool. So rushing for quick fixes with a one plugin does all in one click magically is probably not the best approach, and honestly, it never is. Of course, there are some plugins that kind of help with that, but I'm kind of hesitant to recommend any because we personally do not believe that this is the best approach in this situation. So think about it as like renovating a house, for example, right? So instead of replacing the old piping or fixing the cracks in the wall, you just put up fancy tiles or nice wallpaper, pretty pictures, and it kind of looks nice on the surface for some time, but eventually, sooner or maybe later, if you're lucky, all of those unfixed issues will actually come back to bite you. So that's not the most, not the smartest approach to this.
Yeah, I can imagine this example can ring true for many people who had to deal with it at least once in their lives. And what should the first step be?
I would say always start with an audit. So in any case, and it just doesn't come, doesn't only work with accessibility, but as with many things, you want to do something, audit, like see what needs to be done. So figure out where your website stands as of now, what needs to be improved, and get the list of required fixes. So based on that, you can actually work with it. You have a clear task list, you can analyze it, you can assess the needed effort, you can assess the budget, you can select the approach, prioritize, so on and so forth. I would typically recommend starting with high priority task first if you need to kind of batch it, like forms, navigation, so more critical things.
So basically, run the audit and do the fixes.
Technically, yes, but I feel like I'm never answering just yes to anything. But it is possible that the audit shows that the issues are more profound. Let's call them structural, if we're still sticking to my house metaphor. So, in some cases, it might be worth considering a rebuild if things are really, really bad, which can take accessibility into account from the very initial design phase and then into the development.
So one and done then.
Well, again, not precisely. So accessibility is something that you want to keep in mind at all times going forward, and it makes sense to build it into your processes because this is not gonna go anywhere. It's already a default, and it's just gonna continue becoming more of a default setting. So in
So
general,
yeah, sorry,
oh,
go
yeah,
ahead.
that's okay. Yeah, I just wanted to say that accessibility is kind of a continuous effort, but not just a check mark that you mark done once and like, whew, I'm done.
Yeah, always room for improvement, right?
Just like with anything else. Alrighty, well, I see that we're running out of time, quite running out of time, actually. So, Max, thank you so much for joining me today. I think there was a lot of useful and interesting information that you shared, at least with me, and hopefully with the people who are listening to us. And I kind of wanted to finish it up with a closing statement, or let's call it a motivational statement, and say that accessibility isn't a legal or technical issue, but it's a human one. And making your website accessible is simply the right thing to do. All right, well, at this point, I think that we can open up for questions. I already see quite a lot of questions in the chat. And since we're kind of running out of time, I'm not sure we're going to be able to get all of them, but we will try our best. If we don't, we're going to follow up with you via email and make sure that you get answers to your questions. All right. So let's go to the questions.
Mm.
Let me pick one. I think I answered some of the questions that we had pertaining to the ready-made solutions and online tools. Mhm. Max, maybe this is the one that you can help with. Oh, I see one. Okay, how can we include accessibility in our website proposals without scaring off smaller budget clients? That's the last one that I see. So also something that I kind of already covered, don't sell it separately. Don't sell it as an extra line, but just build it into your processes. Because this is something that you can do at every step, and you don't have to do it as an extra service. This way, it's going to be much easier to pitch it to your clients as basically your default approach and default process, and not just like an upsell thing. Kind of. I hope that answers it. Okay, Max. And there's one more question for you, I think, just about this one. So are there some online tools that scan websites and provide accessibility feedback with these new regulations? Also, is there some checklist available somewhere for content and web builders to use?
Uh, yeah, regarding web tools to scan your website, there are actually three of them you would want to use. First one is DevTools. It's Chrome extension. It's Lighthouse, which is built-in thing within Chrome, and it's Wave. It's also a Chrome extension. Basically, these three they help you to catch as many issues as possible on your website. If you use them separately, maybe some of them miss something. Maybe. So it's better to use them together in complex. So all of them will provide you as much information as possible. Uh, and regarding checklist, there are actually many checklists on the web, and one may be you may want to check. It's the A11Y checklist located at a11project.com. Of course, web accessibility guidelines website, and maybe it's not exactly technical part, but laws and policies they may differ between countries, so you better check them specifically for your country. But of course, contact your lawyer just in case, because it's like too complicated matter to talk about laws.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Max. That's not something I would be able to get. And I think we can do one more. So I see there are quite a lot of questions from one person. So let's pick the last one. At the early stage of website development, what advice would you give on web accessibility? Is it worth using ready-made solutions? I think I can get this one. So also, I think we kind of covered it today. This kind of goes beyond early stage of website development. It starts with the design. So I would say first, make sure that you are familiar with the requirements or the people that you're working with. Designers and then developers are familiar with the requirements. So the design itself has to consider that when it's being created. And after that, the developers and the people who are going to be testing the website should have the understanding of the WCAG guidelines as well, and build the website and test the website, keeping in mind, as we mentioned, the AA level. And speaking about ready-made solutions, we kind of also covered it. We do not believe that this is the best approach in this scenario. So I would probably avoid from suggesting anything or advertising anything. But yeah, you can research. There's plenty of plugins for this available, but I don't feel like we kind of want to endorse any of them.
Yeah, and may I add something from my side
Yeah.
about early stage of the development? Well, basically, it's not about early stage; it's about development in general. But as I mentioned before, also HTML, actually, language part, it's not just for show there. This HTML actually has semantics behind those elements. So use them to the fullest, because if you use them properly, like anchors, buttons, lists, and so on and so on, you actually are halfway done with accessibility of your page, because they are going to be useful for screen reader to provide information for users. Basically, screen readers rely on them.
Okay, perfect. I really appreciate the addition here. Well, I think we're quite out of time, so I think our event manager is going to be looking at me angry that we're not finishing this up. If there's anything that we didn't get, we'll get back to you after the webinar and make sure that everyone gets the answer to their questions. And I really hope you found something useful today and really hope that you enjoyed the experience.